what that was. But all right then. So, voces y visiones. Ahora sí, bienvenidos. Thank y'all so much for coming. Everybody who's tuning in. This is gonna be on the YouTube video. But this is the season finale, season 1 finale. So excited to get into it. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. Oh no. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get into it. So, Voces y Visiones. What is Voces y Visiones? It's where we use art as the catalyst to dive into topics that are affecting our community. We've covered everything from PTSD to the vaccines. And now, with this topic, I feel like it's so important because it's something that's meant a lot to us, a lot to my family, a lot of people close to me. It's affected a lot of people close to me, a lot of people in our community. And I think that this topic and the things we're about to cover are really important. But yeah, so the premise of this show is to use arts as a catalyst to dive into these topics, open things that we usually wouldn't unpack. And real quick, I want to say thank you. Thank you to CMAC. Thank you to the voters of Minnesota. Thank you to Miguel Valdez behind the scenes. Thank you to Alexa Rivera behind the scenes. Thank you to you for tuning in, for everybody who supported from here since the first one. Thank you. Thank all of you. It's been an amazing first season. And let's get into it. All right. So the topic of this one, cancer and nutrition. Now, with the work that I'm sharing on this episode, you see it in the background. And also Miguel's about to pop it up. It's a phoenix. It's one I painted a while back. Now, I wanted to do a painting specifically for the episode, right? And we were thinking about doing stuff with fruit, with food, things like that, or maybe some cancer cells. But I was like, I don't know, that was too straight up. It was like too literal. So I was like, I have work that don't worry about it. That's my brother's dog. So I was like, I have a lot of artwork. What could represent like what I want to talk about? Or what we're talking about, rather than just doing something like that, like fruit and all that. And I thought about the phoenix. I thought about revival, rejuvenation, replenishment. And what made me think of that was thinking about nutrition's role in the body. Like, I've always been interested in nutrition and its role in the body, and like building like a fortitude of things, like to fight against anything, and I haven't always been like that. I don't always keep up with this stuff, but it's something that really matters to me and those I love, and especially when it comes to cancer specifically. So I thought about like, what could we do to give ourselves superpowers? Like, do we have ways that we could strengthen ourselves and through the foods we eat, do the things that we take into our body? So again, now the piece, shout out to my cousin Flaco for buying the piece, by the way. He's got it, he's had it for years. But anyway, the piece is like this big, maybe like 3 feet by 2 feet. It's really pretty much all acrylic on canvas. The background, I did it with like eggshell. I crumbled up a bunch of cascarones and sprinkled them onto the paint, and then started painting on top of it for like texture. So yeah, that's what I wanted to represent. That's why I use that piece to share. Now, let's get into our guest speaker, Dr. John Shin. So I'm going to read off Dr. Shin's bio from the Voces website, vocesvisiones.com, voces-visiones.com if you want to go check it out. So Dr. John Shin graduated from the Loma Linda University School of Medicine and completed his internal medicine residency and hematology and oncology fellowship at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. He then went on to complete a fellowship in cancer immunotherapy at the National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. Dr. Shin's research focus is on immunotherapy, clinical trial development, and the effects of lifestyle interventions in cancer therapy. This is like exactly what I want to get into, exactly what I want to talk about. So thank you so much, Dr. Shin, for joining us. I guess I just want to dive right into it and reference the artwork that I posted. Revival, renewal, regeneration. When I'm thinking about nutrition and its role in our body, and especially fighting against anything, um, I think about that. I think a lot about like things on a cellular level. Like I know that cells regenerate, and I've heard a lot about that. Now, could you just like give us an overall summary just to start with? How big of a role does nutrition and nutrients have in like the fight against cancer, whether it be like preventative, whether it be like post diagnosis? How big of a role does it play at the cellular level and then as a whole?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bobby, for having me on the show. And I really appreciate that you're dedicating this season finale to this very important topic. And I feel very privileged to be here to share. And the question you ask is a very good one. And your question is, what role does nutrition play in cancer, both prevention and in the treatment of cancer after you have the diagnosis? And the simple way to put it is that it's really true what they say. You are what you eat. You know, your food becomes a part of you. And so, even on that basic level, even if you have no scientific background, every tool you have to fight disease in general comes from your plate, right? Everything that your body comprises, all the weapons that you have in your immune system, ultimately is fueled by the food that you eat. So, on this very basic level, nutrition is vital to every bodily function, including when it comes to fighting cancer. So it's vitally important. We also have scientific data that shows that at least a third of all preventable cancer deaths is a result of poor diet. So in my field in oncology, when we deal with cancer patients, I know that there are some cancer patients whose doctors tell them, look, you have cancer, just eat, drink, and be merry. Don't care about what you eat, and enjoy whatever time you have left, and that's it. And I think that's doing our cancer patients a disservice because it really does matter what food you put into your mouth. Just because advanced cancer may not be 100% reversed with diet does not mean that diet cannot help improve quality of life and improve response to therapy and other factors. So I think it's vitally important to talk about the nutrition that you put into your body, especially if you have a disease like cancer.
Right. Oh, by the way, everyone, I forgot to mention the Q&A is going to come up after the conversation. If you want to start throwing out questions, you feel free to do so here in a bit. But yeah, we're going to open it up just to let everybody know. So, okay, so getting back to what you were talking about, Doctor, on a small scale, so like we're talking about, like, let's say we break it down to like a cellular level, like let's say like a cancer cell, right? So cancer is known to like just spread. Okay, now if you could break it down like to like on a cellular level, like how does what we eat affect that, like on that small of a scale, like when we get down into the work that the nutrition does?
Yeah. And so that's the answer to that question is very complex because on a cellular level, you have hundreds of thousands of processes happening at the same time, all of which is, or many of which is affected by nutrition. And to give you an example, one of the areas that I'm interested in for research is the immunotherapy of cancer. And that's simply a fancy way of saying using your own immune system to fight cancer, because your immune system is naturally designed to police your body for cancer cells. And in this state, when you eat foods that are pro-inflammatory, so in other words, foods that rile up your immune system, it's almost like crying wolf to your immune system over and over again, to the point where your immune system can start to ignore some of these signals. And when it learns to ignore some of these signals, it gets kind of exhausted. Then cancers have a chance to grow underneath the noses of your immune system, which is not properly recognizing cancer anymore. That's just one of the many examples I can use. Another example would be if you eat you know, a lot of patients ask me, doctor, does sugar feed cancer? And they hear this on the internet all the time. And I tell them, yes, sugar feeds cancer, but sugar also feeds every other cell in your body. Sugar, glucose is the fuel for the body. Now, cancers are more active than most other cells, so they use a disproportionate amount of sugar. But every cell feeds on sugar. And for example, if you have foods that spike your insulin because they have a high glycemic index, so you have a sugary drink, sugary foods, and your insulin spikes, well, your insulin is a pro-growth hormone. And so your body is sending out a message to all of its cells saying, grow, grow. And you keep doing that over the course of years, and studies have shown that this can predispose to developing cancers in people. So these are just a few simple examples of how on a cellular level, as you say, foods can affect whether or not you develop cancer and your response to cancer.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I had like in mind was the thought of sugar. So then you were talking about glucose. So pro-inflammatory. To get back to that real quick, does that also have anything to do? I think I just watched a video recently about how it. You were talking about the foods and your body reacting. Does that also like up the cortisol in your body, which tells your body to like? Does that have anything to do with it? Like, does that also like? Is it like building your body building up an immunity to cortisol, or like the fact that you don't really like react to it?
So cortisol is your stress hormone,
Mhm.
and cortisol, the negative effects of cortisol comes from the fact that it is actually immune dampening. It's the opposite of inflammatory. So it puts water on the fire of your immune system. And the reason why that can be bad for cancer is that you're trying to use your immune system to fight cancer. But if cortisol is high all the time and your immune system is dampened, then suddenly cancers may go unchecked by your immune system. And so anything that increases your cortisol long term puts you at risk of that. So, for example, if you're constantly working a high stress job, well, your cortisol is going to be on board a lot. We find that people who are chronically sleep deprived have higher levels of cortisol. So, in the end, it's far more complicated, obviously, than just cortisol. But that's one of the bricks that are put on the road that ultimately leads to cancer.
And can, so okay, so then okay, back to glucose, insulin. Now you were talking about your other cells needing this. So is there a specific form of sugar like it? Is there something a one that take like the best version or form of glucose to take, or like have your like sugar, a source? Like, are there specific sources that you should keep away from?
And that's a really good question. So in the end, sugar is sugar. Um, there's no different form of sugar that comes into your body. However, the glycemic index makes a huge difference. So glycemic index is a measure of how quickly the sugar is released into your bloodstream. Is it given all at once and you have a dump of sugar in your bloodstream? Or is it slowly released over time on a gradual level? So one of the things that really helps to control the release of glucose over time is fiber. So you look at things like fruits. Fruits are very high in sugars. However, the reason why it doesn't have the same impact as if you eat a cup of ice cream is because if you eat the whole fruit, you have a lot of fiber in it. So the apple has, tons of fiber. When you bite into it, oranges have tons of fiber as long as you're not just taking the juice and drinking that. And so the fiber combined with the sugar helps to release slowly sugar over time. And so when that happens, you don't get this huge spike of insulin. Insulin is a hormone released by your pancreas that helps your body to absorb the sugar and to use it up. And so if your blood sugar level spikes like this, then your pancreas goes crazy and says, I need a ton of insulin. And it usually overshoots because it sees this massive amount of sugar all of a sudden. And the pancreas produces tons of insulin, far more than it needs. And so you have the spike of sugar followed by a crash of sugar because it dips way down because your insulin is so high. And so your pancreas is like intermittently working really hard to produce insulin to keep up with these unexpected spikes of sugar. And after a while of doing that, the pancreas gets tired and it burns out. And that is called diabetes. So if the pancreas is given a predictable, stable amount of sugar over time, then the pancreas can live with that for the rest of your life without burning out. Also, like I mentioned before, insulin is a pro-growth hormone. It sends the signal for your body to grow, to store, to build. And this growth signal can lead to the cause of certain types of cancers, or at least increase the risk. So oftentimes we find that even though right now there isn't a very strong link between the ingestion of sugar and cancers, we know that uh, there are mechanisms through which, such as this insulin pathway, where your risk for cancer can be increased.
So, so getting back to that, what about carbs? So I know there's a difference between complex carbs and simple carbs. Simple carbs are like white, right? White rice, white breads, and then complex carbs are brown sugar, brown rice, whole wheat, things like that. Now, can you go into that a little bit as far as, is that pretty much just the same thing? It's just it's a slower breakdown and slower like dispersing of the glucose into your body. Is that the difference between brown and white?
Yeah.
Like,
So, so basically, you want to avoid we call the white foods. You want to avoid white rice, white bread, white pasta. These things have a high glycemic index. So if you ingest them, your blood sugar really spikes high and does that number because it's devoid of fiber and other nutrients. The brown versions of these things are a bit better because they contain more of the fiber that's supposed to be found with the original food. And that kind of leads to what I consider to be the most important point in all of this. The, the bottom line is that the ideal diet for fighting cancer is what we call a whole food plant-based diet. Now, let me unpack that phrase. So, whole food means it's the entire plant. It's not just a portion of the plant. So, if it's something that you can look at and you know where it came from, then chances are it's a whole food. If it's minimally processed, it's a whole food. If it's found in a can or a wrapper, or if you open it and you don't know exactly what the ingredients are, chances are it's not a whole food. So being a whole food is very important because we find that there's a lot of nutrients in the unprocessed plant. Now, that's the whole food part. Plant-based is also very important. And what plant-based means is that nothing that had a mother, okay? And sometimes people say, oh, doctor, plant-based, no problem. I eat lots of fish. And I say, that's fine, but plant-based means, made from plants. And the reason why plants are so good for health in general and for cancer in particular is that plants have compounds in them that are not found in any other foods on earth that help your body to fight cancer. And so to me, it's not so important that you exclusively rely on plants, but no matter what kind of a diet you have, if you maximize your plant food intake, then you can only be doing yourself favors.
yeah, that's a really great point. So okay, like say you already have like pretty much you're set in your ways. You already have it like you where I'm not gonna give up meat or I'm just gonna like now how would you what would be your I just realized that I do this a lot, by the way. So anyway, how would you all like what's your suggestion as far as reintroducing or introducing uh like more plant-based into the diet? Like is there a way to like portion control, like say like just to be pragmatic about it, more like realistic about people's like variations in diets, like say somebody does eat should they stay away from certain meats, or like say they do have meat in their diet, should they stay away from certain meats more than others? Should it be more about portion control? What are your thoughts on that?
And that's a great question, Bobby. And that's actually one of the questions that I get asked most frequently by my patients. And they say, you know, what can I do to eat healthier? At the same time, doc, you know, it's not realistic for me to go completely, you know, vegan, vegetarian. So is there any hope for me? And when I was at the Mayo Clinic, in Minnesota, there's a lot of farmers that come to your clinic. And these farmers are, you know, they love their meat and potatoes. And, you know, you can cry, you can you can pry their steak from their cold dead fingers is basically the attitude they have. They're like, you know, I'd rather have death, doc, than give all this up. But they understand that their diet may not be the healthiest. And I tell everyone it's dose dependent. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's not you either have a healthy diet or an unhealthy diet. It's where on the spectrum do you lie? And I tell patients, okay, you know, let's say that you have a 5 gallon jug of water and I put a drop of arsenic in there. Would you take a cup of that water and drink it? And most people may not want to, but you know, studies show that 1 drop of arsenic in that huge amount of water is probably going to just clean your teeth. It's not going to do much to you. So what if I keep on adding drops? At what point will you say, I'm not going to drink that water anymore? And that answer might be different from person to person if the arsenic was really tasty to them. Okay, so I'm using this analogy to talk about unhealthy foods. So if I tell you that what you're eating is unhealthy, but you really love it, right? Then you have to make a personal decision to yourself of how much of this recreational food am I going to tolerate, knowing that it's not the ideal diet for me. It's not an all or nothing kind of a thing, but at least you're armed with the knowledge of what's healthy and what's unhealthy. And so what I tell patients is, look, you don't have to make this super complicated. If you eat plants, it's good. The more percentage, the higher percentage of your diet that you can turn into plant-based foods, the better off you'll be. Okay, with the caveat that it should be a very well-balanced plant-based diet, because I had a patient once who thought by eating plant-based, he had to just go home and eat lettuce made of iceberg, you know, salads made of iceberg lettuce all day long. And that's not a healthy diet because that's not balanced. And at the end of that week, he was ready to shoot himself. He's like, this is terrible. I don't want to eat like this. And I agree. I would shoot myself too if I had to eat iceberg lettuce 3 meals a day for a week. So that's not what I consider a healthy plant-based diet. A healthy plant-based diet is you have a wide variety of really nutritious and tasty plant-based foods. And so the purest diet there is 100% plant-based. And then the worst diet, in my opinion, is 100% animal-based with no plant foods. And you have to set your goal as to where you're going to set yourself in that spectrum. And if you're here, and if you move yourself even to here, even though you're not completely plant-based, you've made an improvement. So it's still worthwhile. And so with all of my patients, no matter how much they don't want to change their habits, I find that they are open to changing something. And I tell you, Bobby, the amount of motivation a patient has to change their diet is directly related to how serious they are about doing something about their health. I have some patients who, once they get the diagnosis of cancer, it's like cold water splashed in their face. And they sit down with a notebook and they say, there is nothing that I will not change about my life if it can give me even a little bit more time with my family. If I can be there even a little longer for my kids, I'll turn heaven and earth upside down. I'll change anything I have to change. Tell me what I got to do, doc. And I say, well, it's good to eat plant-based. They're like, great, done. From this day forward, only plants. And I think, wow, that's amazing. And then there are other people who are like, yes, I know I have cancer, but you know, life is not worth living if I have to eat foods I don't enjoy. And they take a different approach. So different people respond differently. And nothing's going to work if you're not motivated to do what you're doing.
Oh, that's a really, really good point. So then, like, let's say, I don't know. Does this only pertain to? Does this only pertain to animal products? I think. Like, say if we're on that topic. But then there's also like breads and stuff. So what about like the GMO and the gluten and things like that? Does that play any role in any of this?
Yeah. And so, of course, animal-based foods, you know, that's just one category. There's almost an infinite number of ways to have a poor diet, and you can have fried foods, you can have highly processed foods. There's a lot of plant-based foods that are very unhealthy for you. Um, Oreo cookies are vegan, for example, but I don't think anyone will consider them to be a healthy food. So yes, there's a lot of things that contribute. People talk about GMOs and all of these things, and that's kind of beyond the scope of our talk here, because when it comes to all of these things, you have to go through the science but and then people start talking about organic foods versus non-organic foods. And I would say that that's majoring on the minors. If you're struggling with increasing the plant food intake in your diet, and then you start talking about whether it's GMO or organic or all of these things, it's like you're straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel, to use a biblical allusion. Let's major on the majors, and if you've already got the majors covered, then you can talk about how to further improve your food quality source.
Perfect. So okay, so let's say so here's a couple of majors. Alcohol, tobacco, tied into that. Alcohol, of course, being tied into like people having to drink, daily drink or whatever, glass of wine, beer, cigarette. Like how does that also play a role in this as a whole?
Yeah. So it kicks your body when it's already down. So let's say that you already have a diet that's less than optimal. Well, when you throw smoking and when you throw alcohol drinking on top of that, it's adding further insult to injury. So science has found out that there is no safe amount of alcohol to recommend to people. They were looking for kind of that golden amount, that safe amount of alcohol where it can bring you pleasure but no pain, where it doesn't have any detrimental effects on the body. And they found that there actually is no safe level. At any small dose of alcohol into your body, it seems like there's a detrimental effect going on. And alcohol is known, along with tobacco, to be one of the major causes of cancer, especially along the digestive tract. So throat cancers, esophageal cancers, all of these head and neck cancers, alcohol plays a big role in that. Smoking plays a big role in many different types of cancers. Even apart from lung cancer, you have tons of cancers like bladder cancer and pancreatic cancer. All of these things are linked to smoking. So if you eat a very healthy diet, but then you introduce these other factors into your life, it's almost like taking one step forward and two steps backwards. So you make a very good point, Bobby, because sometimes people think that, hey, if I'm very disciplined in one area of life, it gives me license to get away with some other things here. And I would say, look at it as a whole package. Look at it as a symphony. Your body is trying to combine lots of things like proper nutrition, proper sleep, emotional health, spiritual health, physical health, all of these things combined to create the perfect anti-cancer environment in your body. And you're saying, well, let me just use these bricks and let's take out this link here and see how long I can get away with that. And a lot of times we find out, unfortunately, that the body says, no, we're going to create cancer. Even though you have most of the elements, that one element that you don't have was enough to cause your cancer. And then I think stories of like the 90-year-old grandfather who chain smoked for 60 years and drank like a fish, who never got cancer and he died late, those stories get inordinate attention. Definitely those individuals exist, but they are the exception, not the rule. And the fact is that the vast majority of people will never be that person. They won't be able to abuse their bodies like that and get away with it. So I think we should kind of focus on building whole health and not just looking at health one-dimensionally, saying just my diet or just this or just that. It's supposed to be a lifestyle change and not just a quick fix.
So wow, so cancer could really just take that one thing that you're kind of like neglecting or not focusing on and run with it. And okay, what if you already have it? And I guess let me see how I'm gonna frame this. Like, what if you stop all that stuff? Like, if you stop and then you switch over, does that I mean, are the changes gradual to your system, like to your body, or are they like, as far as like switching everything out? Say you cut out drinking, cut out smoking, switch your diet, things like that. How does the body work when it comes to that stuff? Like, is it a gradual change? Is it something more drastic? Is it, what does that look like?
Right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the question you're asking is, are the benefits of diet change, is it gradual or is it instant? Um, is it something that you have to be doing for a very long time to reap the benefits, or the moment you change your diet, do you start reaping the benefits? Is that kind of the question you're asking, Bobby?
Yeah, yeah. In a way, just like yeah,
Changing the lifestyle.
yeah. Not how long do you have to do it, but like how does your body work as far as like, okay, like that immediate connection between like, okay, if I change this, then this is when it starts. This is when my cells start to like, yeah, pretty much like that. But more just long term, not just like, hey, how long do I have to do this before I switch back, but just like how long? When does the change? When do the changes start happening in the body?
Yeah, no, and it's a good question. So there are very short, there are changes that happen almost immediately with your next meal. And then there are changes that don't happen for many, many months, even years down the road. And it kind of makes sense because, for example, cancer, you have to abuse your body unless you have a genetic defect or some other extenuating circumstance that predisposes you to cancer. Cancer, as a result of lifestyle habits, takes many years to develop. And that's why cancer tends to be a disease of the elderly. Now, unfortunately, this day and age, we're finding more younger people getting cancers, and the average age of people newly diagnosed with cancer keeps on dropping. But in general, the older you are, the higher your chances of cancer, because you've had longer time to abuse your body. And all of these things build up over time, and eventually your body breaks down and develops cancer. In the same way, when you change your lifestyle, all the things that you were doing to abuse your body for decades that will tend towards cancer, if you reverse that, then it's not like your body will completely change overnight. It's going to take time for your body to heal and get back to where it used to be, and to reverse those things. So cancer doesn't develop overnight. It doesn't go away overnight. That's one of the things that prevents nutrition alone from being the cure-all for cancer. When cancer is very advanced and you have metastatic disease, you really don't find stories of people changing their lifestyle and suddenly reversing their cancers. That doesn't mean that they're not gaining benefits from it. It just means that they don't have the time to reap the benefits anymore because their cancer is so advanced and so aggressive. However, is there any benefit? If people think, oh, my cancer is so advanced, it's too late for me, why change my habits? Well, there have been studies that shown that living a healthy lifestyle allows you to reap instant benefits. Number one, your energy changes. People's energy levels are huge when it comes to cancer treatment. Fatigue is one of the most commonplace symptoms that you find among cancer patients that prevent cancer patients from enjoying life. You can imagine, if you feel like you got run over by a truck, you may be alive that day and you may have time to spend with family, but you're not going to want to go to the park. You're not going to want to go out on an outing with your family. You're not going to want to be active and spend time with your family. And so if you're just lying in bed because you're so fatigued, you have zero energy, then you're not going to be able to enjoy whatever time you do have. So energy level is huge when it comes to cancer patients' quality of life. Another thing is mood symptoms. Mood symptoms, people with cancer, obviously you can understand why they may be feeling depressed. But did you know that when you have a poor lifestyle, it can further exacerbate that depression? Your mood symptoms can be even worse. But when you eat well, sleep well, exercise well, your mood symptoms improve. You're feeling better, you have a brighter outlook on life, and countless studies have shown that your outlook on life can actually affect your length of life. Have you heard of the story of the grandma who wanted to hold off until her grandson graduated from college, and she's like, I have to live 2 months more because I have to see my grandson graduate from college. And then right after he graduates, she dies. There's lots of stories like this where people are like, there's a goal I'm aiming for. I have to hold off until then. And they inevitably do. And then after that goal is passed, a lot of them pass away. There's countless stories of people who worked all their lives, and the moment they retire, they suddenly have a huge, quick decline, and they get sick, and then they die after they don't have this meaningful work in their lives. All of these things point to the fact that our mind and our body are interconnected in ways that we can't even begin to understand. So when the mind gives up, when the mind is down, when your mood symptoms are down, you're depressed, you have an abysmal outlook on life, and you're thinking, I'm a goner, I have cancer, my days are numbered, and you fall into a deep depression, your immune system gets depressed. Your body kind of heals over and lets cancer run amok. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. So living a proper lifestyle can help to have a defense against that. And then another thing that we see is that people who live a healthy lifestyle, even with a diagnosis of advanced cancer, they have fewer symptoms from cancer therapy. So cancer treatments that can make you really nauseous, the symptoms tend to be less severe in patients who are really taking care of your bodies. They have more reserve. And then some cancer treatments knock your immune system down, knock your blood counts down. And we find that people who took care of themselves and who are taking care of themselves bounce back quicker. So they're ready for more therapy. And ultimately, they're able to endure more cancer treatment, which can translate into longer life. So for all of these reasons and more, I tell patients, even if cure is not a reasonable goal for changing your lifestyle habits, there are so many other reasons why you should change your lifestyle habits that will help you to feel better now, that will help you to respond better to your therapy now, to potentially get more therapy than you normally would have, to improve your mood symptoms. And the only side effect is that it'll also decrease your blood pressure, your chance of heart disease, and a host of other diseases. Those are the only side effects. So why not do it?
Yeah, those are good side effects. Those are ones that I wouldn't argue with. So then, by the way, if y'all want to start just throwing questions in, that way we get to them here in a bit. I'll be able to look back through them if y'all want to just start putting questions on the Facebook Live, so I can read them off here in a bit. Okay, so let's say supplements. Okay, we're talking like vitamins, things like that. Vitamins, B12, fish oil, supplements, and coffee. Those are two things that that I'm wondering about too. I mean, is there a good way to take them? Or, I mean, do supplements help? Do they, do they make up for deficiencies? I mean, is it a good way to make up for deficiencies in the body? And also coffee. Is the coffee good, bad? Is there a way to still drink coffee and not aggravate cancers? Or what is your input on that?
Yeah, no, great questions. So the supplement question, I think, is one of the most frequently asked questions. The moment people get cancer, you'll be amazed. I think the statistics show that on average, 50% of cancer patients research supplements to take to help fight their cancer. And you'll find all sorts of things on the internet about this supplement, that supplement. It's a miracle herb or something, some product that people are selling that come with a lot of anecdotes of how we can cure cancer and how it can do all of these things. Now, in general, I tell people this: supplements are fine if you treat them exactly as that, a supplement to a well-balanced, healthy diet, okay? So if you have the foundation right, then you can add the extras, the cherries on top, like supplements. But if you think your supplements will replace or you can use supplementation to get away with a poor diet, then you'll be in for a rude awakening, because no amount of supplementation is going to substitute for a healthy diet. So first things first, get the diet right, and then supplements can be added on top. Now, are they necessary and do they do good? And there's a lot of conflicting literature here, because as you can imagine, there's not a ton of money in trying to research whether supplements work. And by and large, all of the vast majority of studies that have looked at single elements in your diet, a single nutritional supplement element, have been found to be negative. In other words, it didn't show it much, if any, benefit. And I believe, and a lot of people look at that literature and a lot of doctors say, well, see, there you go, supplements don't work, so don't waste your money, don't take supplements. And that's not what I take away. because there's a lot of these nutritional elements that are put into supplements that were tested because they found that people who consume a lot of foods with that nutritional element seem to do better. And then so what they do is they take out that one ingredient, they look for the silver bullet, without realizing that actually the way the body works and the way that food works is like an orchestra or a symphony. You have thousands and thousands of phytochemicals, which are plant nutritional chemicals that work in concert with each other to produce the health effects that they have on your body. And it's not just one thing here and there that you pull out and that's the magic bullet. You need all of these things, and they're found in the right proportions in whole plant foods. So the plant is the ultimate supplement. Now, if someone has a nutritional deficiency, if someone has a special circumstance like they're pregnant and they want to supplement with folic acid, these things are very good and they have their place. If you have a B12 deficiency, if you're vegan, then supplementing with B12 is a very good idea. But if you're spending hundreds of dollars a month buying all manner of supplements, I would say make sure your diet is very ideal first. And second, make sure you research the supplements to see if there's any potential for harm. If there's any potential toxicities, for example, if some vitamins are fat soluble instead of water soluble. So if you can actually overdose on them very quickly. And so if you're taking too much of them, that can come to harm. You know, minerals and metals, you only want the right amounts in your body. You don't want to overdose on them. So make sure that the chance of harm is not there. And then if you want to take the supplements, I tell my patients, go ahead and take the supplements. It couldn't harm you, and it potentially might do you some good if you had some unknown deficiencies. But don't ever make supplements the main thing. Don't ever make it the bedrock foundation of your diet and health plan. So that's kind of what I tell people who ask about supplements. Then you ask specifically about coffee. And you know, there's been a lot of literature on coffee, and what the literature has shown is that coffee is actually a very powerful antioxidant. So what that means is that it has a lot of health benefits in the body. And you know, the literature on caffeine is separate. So is caffeine healthy for you? It's a stimulant, and it has, I consider caffeine like borrowing energy from tomorrow. So if you want to borrow energy from tomorrow, and it's really useful for you right now, then caffeine might help you. But if you're chronically borrowing from tomorrow, then when tomorrow comes, you're going to need to borrow again from your next tomorrow to, you know, recover from that deficit. And eventually you're going to have a big deficit of energy, and you become a caffeine addict where you can't function without caffeine. You're miserable without caffeine. You're hooked to caffeine. I don't think that's a good place to be. But if you're using caffeine strategically to help you overcome certain times, then I think that's fine. The coffee plant itself, the bean itself, the antioxidant properties, it's actually well documented. There's a lot of health benefits to it. But coffee is also very acidic, so it can be dangerous for people who have peptic ulcer disease and other things. And it can actually, that constant irritation can lead to forms of, you know, gastroesophageal cancer. So my recommendation to patients is everything in moderation as minimally stimulating to your body as possible. Okay? Trying to purge your body of things that put you under an artificial stimulation, eating nutritious whole foods, minimally processed. If you follow these principles, I don't think you can go wrong.
Oh, that's really great. I think that seems to be like the recurring theme too, is like that minimal strain on the body, minimal stress on the body as a lifestyle, right? So what you ingest, you know, will trigger the stress levels of your body and the strain, and also what you eat, like your input as far as like mentally, emotionally, environmentally, and then that comes into you know, the stressors that you're bringing in, that you're allowing in. So is there like something that's absolutely like the worst thing, or like a handful of that is like the worst, like keep away from that more than anything, or that group of things more than anything, like if you'd like to really stay away from that? And also, if you're taking things like, say you are eating more plant-based stuff, is there a specific way or an ideal way to take things in, to eat things, to ingest things? Like, is there something that like diminishes the power of the plants or whatever that you're trying to take in? Like, I mean, is there a certain way to eat these things, or is it just that does it just it's just like just eat it, just like eat that more? And is there something to stay away from, like really stay away from?
All right. So those are two important questions wrapped up into one. So the first one is there any particular type of food that you should say, man, this is the worst of the worst, stay away from it? And the data says that the worst type of food you could eat is processed meats. Now, processed meats, you think of things like, like sausage and pepperoni and bacon, and these things are highly processed meats, lunch meats and things like that, and because they're categorized as a carcinogen, which is a cancer-producing compound on par with cigarette smoking. The International Agency of Research on Cancer, the IARC, has for many years now recognized processed meats as being very, very carcinogenic, hands down. So in all of the nutritional guidelines in this country and other countries and all the cancer societies, you'll see processed meat, enemy number one, like stay away from it. It's everyone in academia understands that processed meats are harmful. Okay, so you want to cut that out. Now, when it comes to is there a way to eat plant-based foods more nutritiously? Is there a way to degrade the nutritional value of plant-based foods? And people here get into conversations about, well, steaming versus frying versus boiling versus microwaving versus blending versus juicing, all of these things. And again, the vast minority of my patients, I believe, are in a position where that makes a difference. The vast majority of my patients are in a place where they just have to eat more plants. I don't care how they do it. They just have to eat more plants. And so for the top 5% of humanity where they're eating tons of plants and now they want to just up their game even more, I would say the data says minimally processed is best. Now, that doesn't mean that the raw diet is the best diet. In fact, there are certain plant foods, if you eat raw, it would give you an upset stomach and it would be hard to tolerate and digest. But if you think intuitively, if you take a perfectly good potato, which is a plant-based food, and then you deep fry it and turn it into a French fry, I think you don't need a degree in nutrition to tell you that that's unhealthy for you. There is evidence that there are enzymes within the foods that denature if you expose them to high temperatures. So if you boil them for a long time, you can have these enzymes denature and be less effective. Also, if you boil something for a long time, the nutrition leaches out into the soup. So if you drink the soup, then that's fine. But if you end up straining away the water, then you're straining away a lot of these nutrients, right? And then there's also been studies that show that when you microwave foods, again, you really increase the temperature within these foods, and that could potentially denature the enzymes as well. So all of that is again prefaced by the caveat that if you're having a hard time, if your plant-based intake is not maximal, then just focus on increasing your plant-based intake and don't worry so much about, well, should I boil it? Should I, fry it? Should I do this and that? Eat as healthy as you can, but start there. Increase your intake of plants because the most boiled broccoli is still better than the freshest prepared piece of pepperoni, right?
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, does anyone have any questions before I move on? We have a little bit left. So if anybody has questions, this is your time. This is the season finale. This is a very important topic. I know a lot of us have dealt with this, are dealing with this, loved ones deal with it. So this is your time to get some great input. So let me know. Just comment right there on the live, on the Facebook Live. Okay, so we got one. My wife has multiple myeloma and has had a double stem cell transplant. Are there certain foods that she should and shouldn't eat I hear that green tea is bad for her.
Mm. So I appreciate this question. So this is a patient who has multiple myeloma and had stem cell transplant for it. Now, patients who get transplanted go through a really rough time. This is one of the most life-altering things you can do to your immune system. You're actually given someone else's immune system. That's kind of the whole thinking behind a stem cell transplant, using someone else's immune system to fight your cancer. And when that happens, you have to obviously undergo some brutal therapy in order to clear your own immune system, make room for the other immune system. And as that other person's immune system lives within you, it can sometimes attack your own body. It often does. And that's called graft versus host disease. And so it's a constant battle between allowing the immune system to do its job and keeping it under wraps as much as possible so it doesn't give you terrible disease. And so for these patients, a lot of times, especially if they have GI symptoms, like they can have mucositis, they can have colitis, and all of these things that make it hard for them to get nutrition. When you're at that point, don't even worry about the source of your calories. Get adequate calories. You don't have the luxury of saying, well, are my calories coming from plant-based sources or this or that? Is it fried? Is it whatever? You know, if you have to eat tons and tons of ice cream just to get the calories you need, then do it. You just have to get calories. Okay. Once you're stable and once you're able to get nutrition on a regular basis and you're maintaining your weight and you're coming back to health and you're becoming more of like a normal person, then you can start implementing some of these other advice where you try to improve the source of your food and the quality of your food. But calories are king when it comes to someone who's having a hard time getting enough calories. So always keep that in mind. When it comes to green tea being, uh, being detrimental to someone who had a stem cell transplant, I'm not aware of that research. I know there has been a lot of separate research about the benefits of green tea, um, notwithstanding the caffeine that's contained in it. But I'm not familiar with anything about green tea being detrimental, particularly to transplant patients. So if whoever asked this question can provide me with a source or something, maybe that can help educate me as well. But for transplant patients and patients who have, for example, head and neck cancer or types of cancers where you have to undergo therapies, where getting nutrition might be a challenge, or if you have a kind of chemo regimen where you're throwing up all the time, your appetite is in the toilet, and all of these things, always, 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 you have to focus on adequate calories first before you nitpick where those calories come from. And so for those patients, I say, eat what you feel like eating because your appetite is in the toilet anyway. And so if you have a craving for something, thank God that you have a craving for food, period. Go eat that as much as you can. Once you're over this hump, then let's try to improve the source of nutrition.
Mm. So it says that okay, they actually used her own cells. Um, I'm not sure what the process is on that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
same thing applies.
Yep. So that's kind of autologous transplants and myeloma and lymphoma. What you often use autologous cells, which is you use your own cells, and the name transplant is a misnomer. It's basically high dose chemo. So they're giving you chemo that's such a high dose that if you didn't take your own cells out first and save them to give back later, the chemo would kill you because it's such a high dose. It would wipe out your bone marrow. So you take out your stem cells and then you use it to rescue you back after you've gotten that high dose chemo so that it doesn't just completely kill your immune system. But it's the same process. You're undergoing really strong chemotherapy and you have really strong side effects, and a lot of patients are unable to get adequate calories in. Not as much graft versus host disease because they're your own cells, but you still have a ton of side effects from the cancer and the cancer treatment.
So okay, so it says okay now can Dr. Shin give input on the room temperature versus cold water? Room temperature water, cold water. Is there a difference? Does it matter?
Okay.
Does your body react differently to the temperature?
Yeah. So a glass of cold water really feels good in the summer, right? Like no one's going to argue with that. It's shown that there are certain enzymes that work in a certain pH level and a certain temperature level. So if you stress the system, the easiest way to say this is that if you deviate from what's normal, the more you deviate, the greater the chance that it's going to decrease the absorptional ability of your body to benefit from these nutrients. So if you drink super ice cold water or super hot water, both of which can be detrimental to your digestion. So if you're eating a meal and you're doing that. In fact, some studies have shown that the ideal way to absorb nutrients is to not drink water while you're eating foods. So to eat foods and then you drink water spaced out from your meals, and drink enough between meals so that you don't have to drink a lot of water during your meals, because then you dilute your digestive juices and you decrease the efficiency of digestion. So also, when you drink cold water, it takes a lot of energy for your body to heat that water up to the point where it becomes usable to the body. And so that's energy that leaches out from your body that has to be restored in another way. Does that mean that drinking a cup of ice cold water is harmful to your body all the time? Well, on a hot summer day, it feels really good. You know, that's not the issue. But if you're chronically drinking just really ice cold water that gives you brain freeze all the time, you're stressing your system again, you're lowering the efficiency of digestion. And I think even though the research is not very conclusive on this, I think it just makes sense that it's better to help your system try to digest in a non-stress environment where you're keeping things normal as possible.
Oh, that's good to know. I just lost a bet. I posted a survey recently on Facebook too, and it was just a private bet about cold water versus room temperature. And I've always drank room temperature. And then I had friends commenting and saying like, no, no, something about shocking the body and things like that. And um, yeah, but that's good to know. So okay, so here's something. Let's see. All right, let me see what are we doing on time. Okay, one last reminder. Any last questions I want to get in? This is your shot. Um, okay. Ingredients, certain ingredients, are there certain ingredients to look for in foods? Like say like I know we want to try to stay as whole foods as much as possible, but like say you're shopping and you want to look back in the ingredients. Are there some things like to look at and it's a red flag immediately? Um uh Also, are there certain cancers that are, I mean, does it depend on really cancer cells, or does it matter? Like, are some more targeted with nutrition, like with certain diets? You know, does it vary depending on what the cancer is? And then goes back to the other question. So his wife had a back injury and her back was broken. Do you think that triggered the myeloma? So those are three. I know I was just trying to wrap them up. Ingredients to look out for if you're shopping, something to stay away from, like really, really, really stay away from. Certain cancers, do they react differently? I mean, to the diet, or is it just? I mean, just go baseline. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. And also, could an injury like that cause or trigger something like that?
Yeah. Okay, so let me do the best I can with these
Yeah.
questions. So there's a lot of ingredients that are terrible in foods. Usually they have names you can't pronounce, okay? And they sound very chemically, for the lack of a better way to describe them. But one thing to watch out for is high fructose corn syrup, okay? High fructose corn syrup is found in many, many foods, and it's some of the worst thing that you can eat. It's a red flag in every single way. So if something says high fructose corn syrup, you want to avoid. To a large extent, there's detrimental effects of something called monosodium glutamate. It's called MSG. It's found in lots of foods that we enjoy. It's found in snack chips and things like that. At some point in the recent past, the food industry lobbied so that they can hide MSG under the label of spices. So there's a lot of foods out there where the ingredient doesn't contain MSG, but you'll see this innocuous looking word called spices, and they can hide dozens and dozens of different ingredients under that one term, which I think is not in the best interest of the public, but that's what they've been allowed to do. So usually if I see that word spices, I say, that looks suspicious to me. I don't know what's in there, so I try to avoid that. In terms of, are there certain cancer types that respond better to nutritional interventions? And I would begin by saying that anything that improves your immune system is good for whatever cancer you might have. It doesn't matter what kind. And nutrition is intricately tied into your immune system. And so I would say every cancer type can benefit from nutritional interventions. But the types that benefit the most are the types that are slower growing, more indolent. And so therefore you have time for lifestyle interventions or to reap the benefits of lifestyle interventions, which you can't change overnight anyway. So things like prostate cancer, breast cancer, lots of studies have been done in these populations simply because these populations tend to live longer with their cancers and you can do more, they're more fit. But rapid moving cancers like pancreatic cancer, small cell cancer, these things can cause the patient to deteriorate very fast, and there really isn't enough time to collect data on how much good diet intervention might be able to do. So it's more challenging. It doesn't mean that it doesn't help. It just means that the cancer is so fast moving, you might not have time to see those benefits, if that makes sense. So I think the rule of thumb is lifestyle change, especially diet change, can help anyone. Even if it doesn't extend your life because your cancer is aggressive, at least it can help you reap the benefits, the other benefits I talked about, mood, energy, and all those things. And then the last question, I think the lady was asking, or the gentleman was asking if her wife broke her back and maybe that triggered the myeloma. Usually it's the other way around. You have myeloma affects the bones, weakens the bones, and sets you up for a fracture. And so a lot of times the symptom that leads to the diagnosis of myeloma is a fracture somewhere. And then they go to work up the fracture and they say, oh, what is this? These lesions look very suspicious. And so I would say that's the order in which it happens. It's not that the fracture caused the myeloma, it's the myeloma caused the fracture.
So, okay, what about, okay, we have a question. Is grapefruit something we shouldn't eat with cancer?
Okay, I am not aware of any literature that says grapefruit is something you should not eat when you have cancer. Now, grapefruit is notorious for interacting with certain drugs, such as warfarin and other things. So if you're on prescription medications, and especially if you're on blood thinners, please check with your doctor to see if grapefruit interacts with these things. But for cancer in particular, I am not aware of any evidence that says eating grapefruit is detrimental to cancer. Or detrimental if you have a cancer.
Are there certain like nutrients or vitamins or anything that are more like that are stronger than others? Like, okay, I hear a lot like about like vitamin C, as far as like your immune system and helping. Like, are there certain ones that are particularly like
Fish oil.
like fish oil, omega-3s, things like that? Are there some that are like more like a super? I know like people don't use that term that much anymore, but like a superfood, like a super nutrient, or does it go back again to the way it plays off everything else?
Yeah. So there are certain elements, the nutrients that have gotten a lot of attention. You may have heard of like turmeric, found in curcumin. And that's been studied. The evidence is pretty impressive that there's a lot of anti-cancer properties. The allium family of foods, such as onions, garlic, leeks, this category of foods has a ton of anti-cancer properties. And in fact, there have been studies that take extracts of different vegetables and fruits, and they apply them to dishes of cancer cells to see which ones inhibit the growth of cancer most. And garlic usually comes out number one for a great majority of these tests for some reason. The anti-cancer fighting ability of garlic and its cousins is huge. They've done a lot of studies on anti-inflammatory properties of cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, and that tends to be very well played out. So these are things that I think it's good to know about, but no one is going to have a bowl of garlic for dinner, right? So it's going back to in the context of a well-balanced diet. And I emphasize that so much because this is a lifestyle change. This is not a sprint. This is not grit your teeth for 1 month, eat everything you hate, and then you'll never have to do this again. You have to find a way to enjoy this lifestyle change, because if it's not enjoyable to you, it's not sustainable. And so what I advise patients is start with one recipe. Find one plant-based recipe that you actually enjoy and keep going through recipes until you find one. And once you enjoy it, put that in your folder and then keep repeating this process until you've accumulated a big list of plant-based healthy recipes that you actually enjoy eating. And when you have enough of these recipes and you're able to eat these things, suddenly you don't miss the unhealthy counterparts. But if you haven't found anything that you really enjoy and you're just saying, well, my Dr. Shin told me that I should eat plants. And so you eat all these things that make you feel like you want to retch and you're not looking forward to your next meal and it makes you miserable and more depressed, then it's better to just go back to your normal diet, honestly, rather than making it a torture to yourself. So your diet patterns won't change overnight. Be very gentle on yourself. If you have a relapse and you go back to unhealthy eating, don't say, well, I tried and it didn't work. Get up and try again. You can always make an improvement. It's not black or white. It's not you're healthy or you're unhealthy. It's based on my diet. How healthy do I want to make my diet? And you can make any improvement, even if it's a small step from where you are currently, and it can still give you benefits. So don't ever think that you're too far gone or it's not worth it to try. It's always worth it to try and push yourself, set small goals, set realistic goals, and you will reap the benefits to the extent that you put work and effort into this, but make it an enjoyable journey. And I guarantee that you will feel better.
Thank you so much. And we don't have any other questions. Is there such a thing as eating too many fruits or having too many fruits in a day? Since it does have a lot of glucose, or does the fiber just like milk it out? Or is there like a limit to as far as fruit goes? Because I know veggies, there's not really one, but or correct me. But fruit, is there a limit to that?
So as long as you're not diabetic, I would not limit your intake on fruits. If you're normal, your pancreas is working normally. And there are people who go on fruit fasts where they eat nothing but fruits for a period of time. And I have some friends and some patients who've done that, and they seem to have reaped lots of benefits. They feel like it gave them more energy and clarity. Now, I don't think that this is something that can be sustained indefinitely. I think it's healthier to have a mix of fruits and vegetables in your diet, but I certainly don't think it's harmful to eat a lot of fruits at any given time. But always, make sure it's part of a balanced meal, because you can always go crazy with something. If someone told me that they're going to go on just a cauliflower diet for the next week, I would raise an eyebrow and say, look, cauliflower is a great food, but why would you eat only cauliflower for a week? And I would have the same reaction to someone who says, yeah, I'm going to just eat fruits for the next week. I would say, yeah, fruits are great, but why would you just do that? So everything in moderation and in balance to each other. And I don't think you can go wrong with plant-based foods.
Thank you so much. So, my takeaway was, more plant-based lifestyle as a whole, being realistic about it, being pragmatic about it, having that balance, moving yourself on the spectrum. I guess, so thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you everybody. Thank you, Dr. Shin. Thank you to Akla. Thank you to Miguel. We're going to post more of like a summary. We're going to post resources, anything that Dr. Shin, if he has anything that he wants to share with us, we're going to post those pages, maybe something to look into. But this is episode 6. We are wrapping it up. This is the season finale. Season 1. It's been amazing. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Again, thank you to Dr. Shin for his time, for his expertise, for his input. This is so invaluable. So please, everybody, you already know, share this with a loved one. Take all this in. I hope you wrote notes down. Again, we're going to post them. Thank you, everyone. Until the next one, stay tuned. We're going to be posting real soon. Voces de Visiones, season 1. It's in the books. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Are we still on the live?
Yeah, I stopped.